Good morning and welcome to New Burlington United Methodist Church. My name's Ed Armantrout and I'm the pastor here. Now the scriptures I've picked out for this morning's message are both pretty long. The first one is Ezekiel chapter 37, 1 through 14, and then John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. So my recommendation is, instead of me reading all that to you, which I normally do, we're going to pause here for a moment, give you a chance to get your Bible out and look up and read those scriptures, and then we'll begin our message today. Welcome back. I called this message, Are We Dead?, with a question mark, and we'll talk more about it at the end than at the beginning. So the first part I want to do is talk about the John. So Jesus is working his way towards Jerusalem. He's friends with this family, including Lazarus, and it's a place where he can go for peace and rest. And so in all this time of chaos kind of around him, he really is just looking for a place of comfort. And so it's a home that's open to him because their hearts were open to Jesus. Now, Lazarus, who's kind of the character we talk about in this, but not necessarily someone that has a big part, Lazarus means God is my help. So that might be important to remember. And so Jesus hears about Lazarus being ill, and they want him to come and cure him because they have faith that he'll be able to do that. Now, if Jesus cures Lazarus, it's going to show the world God's glory, but it's going to be one more way of antagonizing the religious leaders, so it's going to move him closer to the cross at the same time. So one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, he waited kind of a long time to go. And so people have speculated why he did that. One could be he wants people to acknowledge that Lazarus is really dead. The other thing is it makes the miracle more impressive if he's been dead longer. But if you think back to when we read the stories about Jesus, a lot of times he does things on his own time. He doesn't let the people in the situation around him cause him to do something that maybe he's really not ready to do. So he talks about this time. We talked about time last week too, but he talks about this time, and that in this case, it's that there's 24 hours in a day, about 12 hours of it is going to be daylight, and that's unchangeable and fixed. You can't mess with that. And so the one thing it tells us is it gives us the time that we need to get what's important completed. But the other thing it does is it brings a deadline to us, because there's not an unlimited amount of time in a day. There's only so much time, and it should be used wisely. Now, Mary and Martha, we talked about a few weeks ago in the Luke story when Jesus is at their home, but their personalities show up the same way. Martha's still a person of action, so instead of waiting for Jesus to get to the house, she runs out to meet him. Mary's sort of the opposite still. She's the still person, the quiet person, and she's still just waiting at the house for Jesus to get there. Now, if we think about what Martha's saying, it seems like she's a little mad at Jesus. The way I read this, it's, why did you not come at once? Because she wanted her brother to be saved, and she feels like her brother's died. So in the Jewish faith, they do have this belief in life to come at the time of the Messiah when he comes. But Jesus really kind of takes this a step forward. He's not talking about the long-term Jewish belief. What he's telling her is that Jesus is the direction in this life, that he is going to represent that going forward. Now you're going to see on your video here, we have a slide. This is a tomb when we talk about Lazarus coming out of the tomb here in a minute. This is what a tomb looked like that I saw when we were in Israel about 10 years ago. It was in the side of a hill, and they basically just carved out this area. So it had sort of an entranceway as you came in on the left, and then when you looked to your right, there was these two places for the tombs that were carved out of the rock. And what they did in Israel is that it was a family tomb. So you would be in there until you became bones, or they needed to replace you with the next family member. And then they had a box made out of concrete brick, stone, whatever it was made out of, called an ossuary. And the ossuary was a box with a lid, and your femur is your longest bone in your body. You would make it big enough for a person's femur to go in there, and then that's where that person's individual bones would be kept for the remainder of their time. And in ways, you still see that, like in New Orleans for us, because those family tombs, then once it's filled, then somebody has to leave to make room for the newest family member. But Jesus gets there, and although everyone's saying, well, Lazarus is dead, you've waited too long, he brings Lazarus back to life. And so what we see in that is it represents a death of sin in the world. But at the same time, we see what other people need, the needs of others. It also gives us a glimpse of, for us, hopefully for all of us, of what life is to come in the future, what heaven will be like for us, where we have this new opportunity for life. Now I want to talk about Ezekiel. In some ways, these two are connected, which is why in the lectionary they put them together. But I think Ezekiel is talking about something entirely different. Even though we have this story of people being, this valley of bones being reincarnated back into life, I don't think it really represents someone who was alive and then dead and then brought back to life like we read in this John version. Ezekiel, to me, is more about spirit. And so you have these bones that would have no spirit at all. They're nothing. They're just bones. And as you read the story and these bones are knitted back together and they become alive again, I don't think it's representing to us life as what we think of as in the story of Lazarus, where he comes back to life. I think this is more about spirit. So I would tell you, you could be in a church today that's full of people, but it's really not any different than that valley of dry bones because there's no spirit. There's nothing connecting them. And that's what I think the story is in Ezekiel. It's not about the bones being brought back to life. It's about the spirit that's available for all of us. And so I can't tell you whether you have God's spirit in you or not. Only you know that. But what I would tell you is if you look at that picture, envision that picture of what that looks like in Ezekiel, and you think you're that just sack of bones without any spirit, then today's the first day that you have a chance to change that. Whatever you need to do to bring that Spirit of God into you, to refreshen yourself, put those bones, instead of just being a bag of bones, into a spirit-led God person that directs you to the world to become better, not for yourself, but better for the world. Now, whether you are thinking this in terms of Ezekiel or if you're thinking this in terms of the message that we read in John, what they both have in common is this second chance for us to have a new relationship with God. So part of that is as our relationship with God gets stronger and we become closer and closer to Him, and I've talked about this the last couple weeks, it allows us to be better people, to be better neighbors, to not just love ourselves and love our neighbors, but to love everybody, because that's the way God can make us. And sometimes I think people forget that when we have that kind of relationship with God, we're going to have a lot better relationship with life in general. Because none of us know whether we're here today, or we're here tomorrow, or we're here 100 years, or 100 hours. We don't know. But what you want to have is a God-led life that leads you to have the best life possible. And the closer you become to the Lord, the greater the opportunity for that life is for each and every one of us. And so as you read Ezekiel and you read this, John, and you don't have to just read it once, you can read it a number of times. Think about what the differences are and whether God's Spirit is really working in you. A couple things I'd like to remind you of. On Easter Sunday, we are going to have a sunrise service here at New Burlington at 7:30. You're certainly welcome to come. It'll be kind of a light breakfast of coffee and juice and some rolls that day. Then we'll have a regular service at 9 a.m. The other church that I share a pastorate with Avondale. They're going to have a Easter or a Good Friday service at 6 p.m. that day at the church. And you certainly are welcome to attend that also. If you ever need anyone to come to your home for counseling, if you want to have a communion service sometimes, but you don't have the ability to get out of your home, my phone number and email address is be on one of the slides. You could give me a call or send me an email, and we'd work that out where we could do that for you in your home or if you're in a nursing home as well. Thanks again for watching us, and God be with you.